the slaughter, I saw it all. Slaughter by electrocution, and then slitting of the throat. I saw slaughtering by hanging, by clubbing. So this is a slaughterhouse. The owner also owns a restaurant. This is your most common way of a slaughter, electrocution. They put the electricity rod inside the mouth. They die or they go unconscious, but most of the time it's just they go unconscious. There's no voltage regulation, and a lot of these electric rod things are all like makeshift. The current is not stable, it might be not enough high voltage, right? Then it's dumped in hot water.
Some say dogs are intentionally boiled alive in Korea, which isn't true. However, dogs that are improperly electrocuted may regain consciousness while in the scalding hot water or in the hair removal tumbler, although we haven't seen this happen. After this, dogs are blowtorched with their skin on to remove any remaining hair. The dog is then cut into small portions.
아까 그분이 이 개 데리고 온 분이 그 농장에서 오는 거야? 아니면 식당 아니면? 아.
80년대 초까지도 아마 그렇게 해든가 해가지고 잡은 적이 있었고, 그 다음에 이제 이렇게 묶어서 잡는 방법. 근데 이제 그 당시에는 전기 침사를 하는 거를 몰랐던 부분도 있었고.
But there are still some rogue traders who are stuck in the past.
Maybe 2% hang, and maybe 5% beat to death.
Garcia filmed one slaughterhouse in Daegu that kills via cutting the dog's throat. They stun the dog by striking it on the head in front of other dogs before dragging it to the kill floor. Then they cut the dog's throat, a method that is very bloody and doesn't seem to be very effective. This dog woke up and sat up midway through slaughter, blood gushing from its open throat.
Hugo Chavez.
Spiking stations. Stadium light seating. Ringside judge checking for poisons. Singular bets range from $20 to $10,000. The fights. Young children attend the fights.
In today's podcast, we are joined by AJ Garcia, a prominent animal rights activist who, along with a previous podcast guest, Kevin Leahy, is responsible for conducting, to this day, the first and only extensive undercover investigation of the dog meat farms in South Korea for CARE, Coexistence of Animal Rights on Earth, a South Korean animal rights organization. And this was done between 2010 and 2012. AJ was so widely successful that he was sought out and hired to do undercover work, this time in the United States for Mercy for Animals, a 501c charity based in Los Angeles, California. Having built a reputation for being a highly effective and skilled investigator, AJ was once again sought out and hired, this time by Animal Recovery Mission in 2018 as director of the Arms Sanctuary and as the head of the Undercover Investigation Unit for Animal Recovery Mission. Today, AJ heads up the operations at 50 by 40, an organization that is championing comprehensive change in global food systems and aims to cut animal agriculture by 50% by year 2040. So that's a lofty goal, and we're gonna talk all about that today. So AJ is clearly a dedicated animal lover, advocate, activist, vegan, who has devoted his life to helping end animal suffering in every part of the world. He is a hero in every sense of the word, and I'm so honored to share his story and his many experiences on both sides of the ocean with all of you today. So without further ado, welcome to the show, AJ.
Thank you so much. Really kind words there, and I'm very excited that we finally get to do this. I know we've been planning it for a while, and super cool that you've connected, you know, with my my brother from another mother, as I like to call him, Kevin Leahy. You know, he is actually the reason why my life it is the way it is today.
He was instrumental in making you aware of the plight of animals, right? So
he was instrumental in many ways. You know, not just in my professional life, but my personal life. You know, he introduced me to my daughter's mother. So like Kevin Leahy, yeah, he was instrumental in shaping my life. So I owe a lot to him, and you know, I respect him very much.
Me too. Same here. Like, I think he's done that for many people. So thank you, Kevin, if you're listening. So before we get into the gist of our conversation today, because we have a lot to cover, I would like to maybe get a little bit of a better idea of like, where were you born and raised, your background, like I'm always curious what makes someone dedicate their whole life to animal rights. And so I believe you're from Venezuela. Is that where you were born and raised? Did you have a big family? If you could tell us.
Yes. Yeah, so I was born and raised in Caracas, Venezuela. And, you know, I have a younger brother and a younger sister. And yeah, I mean, we had a pretty normal life there. You know, I was there until about 10 years old. So, I wasn't really, you know, it was just, like just a normal life.
Typical family.
Yeah, typical family. You know, like advocacy and things like that weren't on anyone's radar. It was just, you know, just normal, typical family. And then at the age of 10, we immigrated, you know, my whole family immigrated to the United States, and we immigrated to Florida. And then we lived in Florida for like 3 years, and we moved up to New York. And still like, you know, I was just kind of doing my thing, you know, going to school, normal, you know, I wasn't really into any kind of advocacy. I wasn't thinking about those things. Right.
No,
and it wasn't until go ahead.
Well, did you have pets growing up? Like, that's always something I'm curious about, because, you know, through pets, we learn to love animals and appreciate them. So,
yeah, so we didn't have, in Venezuela, when I was living in Venezuela, we didn't have pets in the city where we lived. But, you know, like my grandparents, and then, you know, like they had like a beach house and stuff like that. So we you know, they had, you know, dogs, but I didn't. And then we got a Cocker Spaniel, and we were living in New York. So I was, you know, already, I think, in middle school by that time. And her name was Lahey, Lacky, because we wanted to name her Lucky, but because she was a girl, we thought Lacky. I mean, we were all very young, my brother, sister, and I.
That's cute,
so
that's cute,
yeah, so yeah, I mean, for me, I really came into advocacy in my mind really late. But it's better late than never. And
Absolutely.
nowadays, I mean, I see this in my own daughter. She's 7, and she knows why we don't eat animals, and she knows what's happening to the planet. So it's a very different time to grow up nowadays. So I came into advocacy a little late, but animal rights advocacy was my gateway drug, if you will, into just general advocacy, like for social justice and all that jazz. So
yeah, no, that's something that's important to mention, is that you fight for animal rights, but also for human rights, for all sorts of social injustices. And, you don't just stop at the animals. You want, freedom for everyone, like every living being. And so, okay, so a typical family growing up, and I have to wonder, so you're in New York. I imagine you probably did your studies there at a university in New York. And what made you take a teaching gig in South Korea? Because this is where you met Kevin Leahy, your investigation partner, and now brother from another mother.
yeah, I went to South Korea my sophomore year of university. I applied for study abroad, and I went there 2004. And I liked it, and ended up extending my study abroad program for one more year. And I had to go back to New York quickly, finish up like one semester to graduate. And I went right back to Korea. And, I taught English for a while. And then it wasn't until my last official kind of English gig, which was teaching at a women's university, that I met, Kevin Leahy. I was walking out of the interview, and he was walking into the teacher's office, and, where are you from? Blah, blah. Oh, I'm from New York. Oh, like lived like right across the river from each other.
Yeah.
And, during my work there and working with him, he started kind of nonchalantly feeding me advocacy work and like veganism stuff. And he did it in such a way that was so inclusive and welcoming and non-combatant, and just hey man, this is what I eat, this is what I do, like just regular conversation. And
he was already vegan, or was
okay. Yes.
So you had been in South Korea since 2004. That was your first visit. Was it the first you were visiting Asia? Period?
Yes, that was the first time I was visiting Asia. The first time I was, kind of going somewhere by myself. And so I got.
What field of study were you pursuing?
Linguistics, with, some Spanish mixed in, and Korean. So I wanted to go to learn Korean, and, that all stems from just, personal history.
Key. That was a big key element in the success you had with Kevin, obviously doing undercover work, because you needed someone that was fluent, that could speak to the farmers and all sorts of stuff. So that came in handy. And so it was a Duck Song Women's University, and it was in Seoul. And so you were living in Seoul, I imagine. And you meet Kevin Leahy, and slowly but surely kind of shows you stuff that makes you think about, the plight of animals. Was it more like vegan stuff, or was it really strictly related to dog meat farms?
No, it was general veganism things. Okay. And, he was like, I volunteer for this organization called CARE, and just kind of sharing, stuff that he did. And then one day, this is the moment, right, that kind of really changes my life forever. We were running trails behind the university, because we love to run. And during that run, I think it was the summer of 2011, I think, or 2010. But during that run, he was like, hey, this organization that I'm volunteering for, we're working on this project, and, just the kids have, we have a week off because the kids have exams. Do you want to volunteer? And I was like, sure. What do you sure. I mean, volunteering sounds a cool idea, you know, and I have time. What is it? And he's like, well, we want to go visit some dog meat farms and see if we can talk to farmers and maybe get some footage. I mean, I had no idea like what I was getting myself into. Like, no clue. I was like, yeah, I mean, sure. And I was like, why me? It's like, well, you speak Korean and maybe, you know, they'll want to talk to us. I don't know. And so, and, you know, it was the whole thing, like, how are we going to go? What are we going to say? Like, how are we going to, you know, present ourselves? This whole thing. I was like, sure, let's go do it. No training, no nothing. I volunteer, help you out. Let's go visit some dog meat farms. I didn't think anything of it. And I wasn't vegan at the time. I wasn't even vegetarian at the time. I wasn't like a heavy meat eater. Like I didn't think about those things. Like for me, it wasn't.
It was not part of your environment.
No, I was just doing my thing, eating, you know, whatever, like living my life.
Like many people.
Exactly. Making ends meet, going through the motions, you know, teaching English in Korea. That's that. So, and I said, yeah, let's do it. And, you know, after the first week, we were so successful. And what I saw, you know, I mean, seeing any living creature, you know, being killed, right? Just in live, in person. I mean, you know, the sentient being happened to be a dog. So I don't know if it would have been a pig or a cow or something, it would have been different, like the impact. But just seeing a sentient being, you know, be killed in front of me, you know, live in person, really shook me. And I was like, you know, Kevin, you know, I feel really conflicted, you know, what do I do? And he's like, here, read Peter Singer's Animal Liberation. You know, and I read that. I was just actually destroyed by a dog that he rescued from a dog meat farm. His name is Mac, and he took the book, Animal Liberation book, and he just like completely ate it, which is very ironic.
Oh my God.
It is very ironic.
But I just want to go back a little bit because, okay, so Kevin had already started volunteering for CARE, and that's the organization that you later on, I think you became president of CARE, but I'll ask you the question again. But basically, so he's saying, okay, you have a week off, come and help and volunteer and go visit some farms. So he had already proposed the idea of doing investigations with CARE. And they wanted someone that could speak fluent Korean to accompany, obviously, Kevin. And can you tell us, like, under what premise were you able to visit these farms, like, openly? You know, what kind of excuse were you coming up with?
Yeah, so, you know, this was a very typical kind of, you know, what I like to call the third party kind of investigation, right? Like, James Bondish, I guess, or spyish, if you will, right? Like, you know, it's not a work placement investigation where you work at the facility. So, you know, we approached it in a way, you know, of saying, hey, you know, I'm from Venezuela and I'm interested, you know, in the industry. I want to, you know, open up a dog meat farm in my country. Show me the ropes, right? And I mean, yeah, it was either that or like, you know, pretending that we were Mormon and like, you know, doing some like Bible thing or whatever. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to like pull that off. So like, let's just go with like the business angle. No, let's just go for the business angle and see what happens. And, you know, this is a true testament to like, I guess the human psyche and like how people change when they see prospect of like profit or like chance of like success or chance of something good happening right in their life, right? So you know, we got so much access just the first week that I decided to again stop teaching English and just start doing this full time.
Yeah, well, you had to because it was extensive. I mean, a year and a half is a long time. And you visited, I don't know how many farms, like hundreds of farms, right? So yeah, hundreds of farms. And I mean, we didn't know it was going to be this extensive, right? This was just like,
they were trying, organizations were trying to get like a comprehensive look at the dog meat industry, like, from being born, raised to like all the way to slaughter and then in the restaurant. And it hadn't been done before. So this was just like, let's try this.
Yeah.
And, at that time, after that 1 week, did I know that it was going to take a whole year and a half, to kind of finish it, or wrap it up? No, we didn't. We didn't know how long it was going to last, because at some point we figured that we would just be made and people would not trust us anymore. But we were able to keep it going for a while.
Wow. And these farmers, they wouldn't ask for money. They would just like say, okay, yeah, like out of pride, like they want to show you how they do their business. They were like, okay. So, and, I have to ask you, like, do you remember the first farm you visited? And were they mostly small scale farms, or did you go after all sorts of farms? Because I know in South Korea, from speaking with Kevin and, watching the documentary, frankly, because all your work and investigations were made into two documentary films. Like, one is a short form called Korean Dog Meat Expose, which we featured on Kevin's podcast. And the other one was made, the longer form is called Dog Meat Professionals. So all of the footage you took on, I guess a smartphone, is that, kind of a lot of the footage was taken on a phone that was kind of hidden. Do you remember the first farm you visited, and how did you feel? Like, what was the impact on you after that first visit?
Yeah, so it took us a while to actually, find that first farm. I mean, we started on October 11th, and it wasn't until October 17th that, we actually visited like a first farm, and it was through somebody that had a dog meat restaurant, and he also operated his own slaughterhouse. And, that day, I mean, there was so much adrenaline and just so much adrenaline, anxiety, like nervousness. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe we're like watching this take place. I can't believe we're hopefully getting this on film, because we don't know at the time, right? Like, hopefully the angle's okay. And we used, it wasn't just phones. We used several other things to record. But yeah, I mean, it was a very typical kind of slaughter. The dog would get kind of electrocuted. I mean, who knows? I mean, everything there was like makeshift. It wasn't, I don't know if the amp was steady or not, but, and then, unfortunately, the dog gets electrocuted, and so then he goes to get his throat slit and then ends up being slaughtered. I mean, it wasn't until we returned back to the office and we were reviewing the footage that like, it really kind of hit me. And that's the way with a lot of the investigative work that I've done throughout my career. When you're in it, I mean, at least myself, I become more of like just a camera. It's like and then because you're also kind of focused on so many other things, like if you gave yourself time to actually emotionally connect and respond, then you would be made immediately, and then you wouldn't be able to do the work. So for me, it's actually, either replaying memories in my head of what I saw or watching the footage afterwards that's a lot more impactful for me, because in the moment there's so much stuff going on that I mean, I don't have time to think about those things as they're happening live.
I can imagine, because it's like, I think it's akin to a soldier going to war. Like, you have to put your emotion aside or you will not be able to complete the mission, as we say. And doing that kind of work is, like, you didn't know what you were getting yourself into also. But yeah, I can only imagine how traumatizing it must be, because you've never seen anything like it. Like, it's not like you had experience looking at slaughterhouse footage before this. This was literally the first time you saw an animal being slaughtered in front of you, and it happened to be a dog. And you know, like we can say what we want, but the reality is dogs, at least for us Westerners, they are man's best friend. You know, like they're seen as a companion animal. They're not seen as a dinner table food. And so that's why a lot of people are very reactive when they see this kind of footage, because it hurts them. It's like, it's like a child, you know, being slaughtered. For them, they're very attached to their dogs, especially in America. It's like a dog loving culture type of, you know, society. And that's not to say that if they would see a pig being slaughtered, you know, they don't see that. You know, that's the difference between the dog meat trade and regular farming of animals, is that people aren't exposed to this kind of footage. Whereas the dog meat trade did such a splash, you know, with Yulin Dog Meat Festival reaching so many millions of people across the world, people that would normally never see that kind of footage. They're not animal rights people. They're not even connected to animal rights people. And so they saw that for the first time, and it's shocking, you know? So I think, yeah, I can totally understand that this was, you were taken aback, you know, from your first experience, but it did not deter you or discourage you from pursuing this. And I guess you were determined to at least expose what's going on, because a lot of the issue is the public doesn't know, or they're being lied to. They're pretty, you know, they think it's all good. You know, the dogs are being taken care of. They're dog meat dogs, which is another thing in Korea. They kind of make a distinction between dog meat dogs and pet dogs. But I think in your investigations, you saw many dogs that were pet dogs that had been either sold to a farmer or they were stolen from a family. And so, okay, so your first visit, it goes like that. And how many farms did you visit? And did you visit large scale farms as well? And is there a difference between the way they treat the dogs from large scale to, you know, smaller scale? Like, is there a big difference in the way the dogs are bred and treated?
Yeah, I mean, we visited, you know, farms and slaughterhouses, big and small. You know, some farms would have, you know, 10 dogs. Other farms would have 500 dogs. And, you know, they're all pretty much the same. You know, the treatment of the animals are pretty much the same in terms of how they're kept. You know, the slaughter method might be different here. You know, and yeah, I mean, it was a lot of places. And yeah, the whole thing about dog meat dog and pet dog, you know, it's the industry. It's the same thing as, like, you know, the animal agriculture industry. You know, anywhere else saying, you know, we have, you know, grass-fed beef, you know, organic this, whatever, you know, free range eggs. Like, it's just to put the consumers, yeah, because you don't want to think that you're eating a poodle, right? Or like, you know, a cocker spaniel that you have sitting next to you. No one likes that, right? No one wants to think that.
Well, a dog meat dog, typically I think they're Tosa breeds, like big yellow dog. That's a typical dog meat dog, if you will, in Korea. But, you know, your footage does show all sorts of dogs, you know, like huskies in there, also Samoyeds, you know. Frankly, I saw the documentary footage and it's pretty horrific. And, you know, although we have covered, you know, like the film and, you know, how they're kept, like, if you wouldn't mind telling viewers at home that might not have seen the other podcasts, how are dogs kept typically on a dog meat farm in Korea? I think they're on elevated wire cages. They don't have any flooring exposed.
Sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the size of the farm or the slaughterhouse. You know, the purpose to not having flooring is just so you know, so the feces doesn't you know, accumulate. But, you know, there are lots of farms that have some kind of flooring or some like wooden plank or something. But yes, it's, these giant metal, cages that are typically like wired, and the cages, they have kind of really big slots. So like, when the dogs are younger, they can get like their paw, their foot like stuck in there, and like it's not great. And yeah, I mean, they're not cleaned, they're not maintained. Dogs are, always several to a cage, and dogs actually like their own space. Like they don't enjoy like being crammed together with a bunch of other dogs. Even though dogs tend to be very social animals, right? Like, they love, to play and stuff like that. But no, they really enjoy their own space. And yeah, I mean, they're seen as nothing more than just a product, right? So like, how can we keep?
There's no effort to shield them from the elements. I mean, they're often exposed with just like little. And
yeah. I mean, sometimes you'll find like, they have boards on the side, because it does get really cold in Korea in the wintertime. Freezing cold. And I've seen, and you're probably seeing in the footage, like frozen food, frozen water, or no food, and or like directly in the heat in the summertime. And yeah, I mean, till this day, dog meat farms are like the worst smelling and the worst kind of visual place I've ever witnessed, like in person. The ammonia smell is
the stench, the stench.
Even though you're outside, 9 times out of 10, it's not an indoor facility.
Yeah,
I mean, it just smells and reeks, and very, very super loud, of course, with all the dogs barking all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, you also find, dogs that have died, dogs
Frozen.
with like bite marks because they fight with each other. There were several farms actually where dogs have trampled other dogs, and like the other dogs have become like a floor mat. Right? So
I saw that. Yeah, it's horrific.
Yeah. But I will say, the investigation that we did take place, almost 10 years ago now, right? And I think it is till this day the only kind of extensive look at the industry. I haven't really seen any new footage since. And are things different? I don't know if things have improved at all. I mean, if things don't improve for farm animals, I don't really see them improving for dogs. But
according to all the posts that are shared by Korean groups, I don't think it's changed much. Because at the end of the day, it's a business for profit, and lower the costs of maintaining these dogs, the greater profit. What has maybe changed, and you can attest to that, is the mentality of the public. I think the population is more informed than ever. Thanks in large part to your investigation, because they got to see firsthand how these dogs are raised, and it's torturous. And so would you say now, I don't know, like you're living in the States right now, but I think you visit Korea quite a bit. What would you say? Has the mentality changed by the majority of the population? Are they more against this than before?
That's a really good question. So before we started our investigation, CARE conducted like a third-party poll, and like a survey poll. And, actually before the investigation started, there was still, the majority of Koreans did not want to make dog meat illegal, right?
Okay.
Like as a whole. And like laws in Korea are very complex, as in any country, and the dog meat industry has a lot of gray areas in terms of law, because you can legally, have dogs, like raise dogs in a farm-like environment, right? There's nothing illegal about that, right?
No.
But then there's areas of that process, between that process and then from like farm to table, that are very gray, right?
Yeah.
And but in 2011, the poll, showed that there wasn't a majority, right, that wanted to ban the dog meat industry.
And then in 2016, we did the same poll again, and there was a shift, right, to like a majority wanting to like ban the industry. And of course, this is because of not just the investigation that CARE did, but also there's so many other countless organizations in South Korea that have been working before I started doing this, right? Have been working tirelessly for decades into exposing and trying to ban this industry, right? Or even not just ban it, like there are existing laws that you can use to mitigate some of the suffering and to hold farmers accountable to do things a better way, even though, of course, the goal is to get them banned. But, a lot of work has gone into this. So it's really, a team effort. But right now, it's the sentiment is very strong for banning the industry. The president of South Korea adopted, Tori, the rescue dog from CARE. There's legislation being put forward to like ban the industry, to move forward and kind of,
Well, that's actually part of my questions, and I might as well just skip there right away because I know there's the upcoming elections in 2022. And I'm just going to go to that part because I don't want to say something that's not true, but it's going to be held on March 9th, 2022. It will be the 8th presidential election. And Lee Jae-myung is a presidential candidate for the ruling Democratic Party of Korea. And he wants to establish a law banning the consumption of dog meat in the country. And Jae-myung was responsible for shutting down the Moran dog meat market, which I believe happened in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. So this pledge by Jae-myung is of banning dog meat is further bolstered by President Moon Jae-in's recent statement that it is time to seriously consider the ban on dog meat. And so this gives us a lot of hope, but he's one of 5 candidates, right? And I know that you obviously have built a network of contacts in Korea, even though you don't presently live there. What is the consensus opinion? Does he have a good chance of winning this election? Or, are people's response to his campaign, I guess?
So I actually I'm not following this election closely, and March 9th is my birthday, so that's got to mean something.
Wouldn't it be apropos you would win?
That would be a very sweet birthday present if somehow this upcoming election was tied to the end of the dog meat industry, right, in South Korea. Well, what I can say though is that whatever candidate wins, right, there is enough public support. Like polls show that there's enough public support for a ban, right? So it's just a matter of, continued pressure by, all the groups in South Korea. I don't think outside pressure works very well. So I would encourage, it's a pride thing. It's, no one likes to be told what to do, especially by foreigners, right? So I really think that, continued pressure from within, South Korea, there's already enough support there to, put a bill forward and vote on it. Absolutely. So I don't think it's really a matter of who gets elected. I think it's a matter of okay, so if you have the 5 candidates and you have several candidates, 1 or 2 candidates that are publicly kind of having that in their campaign promise, right? If they have other good policies that are beneficial to to South Korea, right? Because if it's just dog meat and everything else is not that great, then
you
gotta,
sure. They
right?
have to have
So,
more than that, of course.
Support that candidate, and then making sure to hold them up to the end of the bargain, right? To make this a top priority and ban the industry. With that said, right, it's not just about banning the industry, right? You also have to take into consideration, what we call a 50 by 40, like a just transition, right? Like you got to have some economically viable way for those dog meat farmers to transition out of.
It's a big ask. It's a big transition because I think, if I'm not mistaken, you'll correct me. I think it's like a $2 billion industry a year, so dog meat farms are a big thing because they have dog meat trade unions and all sorts of, like these professionals need to be reoriented towards a more ethical way of earning a living. And for that, the government really has to put in place programs, educational programs, and invest in the future of the country if they really want to shift away from this. And on that front, I'm in talks with many people on social media that like to do tweets and try to encourage change in those countries. And you just said that outside pressure doesn't work, but is there something that we could do to support the local animal rights groups in Korea? Because I'm sure this is a big, important event for them to try to campaign around and to try to, promote the ones that are, enacting or promising to ban the dog meat trade. So how could we help support this,
Yeah, I mean, how can, and let me be clear. It's not that, outside pressure doesn't help, but there is, like kind of a Western, colonization thing that happens where like, it's actually more global North and global South. So you have these, huge like nonprofits with like all of this funding that, have over the years just gone into a country and just completely, for lack of a better expression, cannibalized, right? Like all these donations, all of these things, and they don't really help to empower, right, local groups that have been doing the work for decades,
for years.
And who know like that know like how society works, that know the legislative system, that really understand, why the dog meat industry exists, for example, right? So that is a very kind of touchy subject for me. And it's not that, people shouldn't, like vocally support, South Korean groups, fight to ban this industry. It's just that it needs to be done in a way where those groups on the grounds need to be the ones that are front and center, right?
I agree.
That's all. And what can you do? I mean, of course you can always donate, but with donating, I always encourage people to do their due diligence and making sure that the group that they're donating to is doing the right thing.
For sure.
Offer your services for free. English translations are always needed because again, there is a lot of people from the West and the global North that are interested in donating. But I always think that it's always best to deal directly with the groups on the ground, and not through some intermediary big organization that already has like hundreds of millions of dollars in budget. When the Korean people on the ground have been fighting this war for like decades, and they see like a fraction of those donations, a fraction.
Of course, because there's a lot more international support for this ban, and like local Koreans are progressing in their views, but I agree, and I think it's been done, particularly in China. We've seen like HSI used to go right in there and like kind of rescue dogs, get donations, and leave with the dogs. But now they actually do support programs in China, educational programs. They support spay and neuter clinics with their money, and they fund those programs. I can't say that it's been done the same way in Korea. So that is something that we should think about, because you're absolutely right. We need to fund the people that are there, boots on the ground, that know and understand Korean culture, and that they're going to do it the right way. They're going to know how to approach people. And so on that note, I know CARE, obviously, I'm a little bit curious, like, did you evolve to become the president of CARE? Because that's what Kevin had told me. And I'm just a little bit unclear. Like, how did your position with CARE evolve from the time you were investigating farms?
Sure. So I started there just doing the investigative work, and then I started to do like managerial work and doing campaigning and just video production, like fundraising, just a bunch of different things. And then for CARE Korea, I went up to be like director of CARE Korea, and I oversaw like the shelters and the adoption centers, and then a lot of the English side of things. So like anything to do with like dealing with international groups and international fundraising and all those kind of things were kind of up to me. And then we set up CARE US, where I was like the president of CARE US. So yeah, CARE US was a 501c3 for about 5 years. And it was
what years? Like
I think 2015 to 2020.
The pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't it wasn't like a full-on operation, right? It was mainly so that we were able to like showcase the work, and then if people wanted to donate to CARE Korea, and they were in the US, they can do it through CARE US, and that would CARE US was like a fiscal sponsor, right?
Yeah,
a fiscal sponsor
so you could get a tax deduction receipt, which you can't if you're donating to a foreign organization. So that's why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, so CARE and any other organization you would recommend that we support, like any ones that are top of mind that actually do legitimate good work and that you would support?
I have been unfortunately out of the loop there.
Yeah.
There's CARE, there's CARA, and I know a couple of other have kind of sprung up. So I wouldn't.
Which is Korean Animal Rights
Association.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then there's KAWA,
Korean Animal Welfare Association.
Yeah. And then there's also Animal Liberation Wave, which is sponsored by Last Chance for Animals. And the head of that nonprofit on my podcast, and she's a young Korean woman, very smart, very compassionate, and they actually are the ones promoting veganism in Korea and trying to make people realize that animals like they're sentient beings, and they don't belong on people's plates. So they're doing a lot of good work there. So I guess the message overall is like support the local nonprofits. Obviously do your due diligence, but I think we can all say that CARE is a great one to fund, because they do amazing work. A lot of the work that you've done has actually made a lot of strides, and I do believe that, the investigation was, a big key element and changing people's perception, so we're very grateful for that.
I don't know, but thank you. I mean, I will say the investigation was way too early for its time. Like it was just, I don't think that Koreans and also even CARE, right, was kind of ready for that sort of investigation. Like I wish it would have happened like 5 years after or something, right? I think what they say was like they
weren't ready to see that.
It was too early. Yeah, it was too early, and that's kind of like my only thing. I feel that they weren't ready for it. Like as a country, like I just but
to this day, your footage is constantly used, right? Like, I don't know if you're aware, but, petition, they always show Stop It, which was a campaign that featured the documentary footage that you took. And so it's still very relevant, like it's helping them send the message, so, it was a great one. I think you should not have no regrets over that. And, like you said, it's a progress, it's something that, it's a journey, and people might not respond right away, but it does make its way, So yeah, enough, kudos to you. And in terms of, okay, so as an undercover investigator, actually, I think you're the first one with Kevin that I've interviewed. And I'm always curious, I mean, having seen, witnessed everything you've seen and witnessed, it's a horrific cruelty. Firsthand, would you do it again? And what do you believe makes a good undercover investigator? Like, what kind of qualities should one possess if they're interested in doing that kind of work?
You know, I was doing undercover work all the way up to March 4th, 2020. So it hasn't been that long since I've actually been out of the field, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, would I do it again? You know, probably not. Maybe if my daughter, when my daughter's older, and maybe when she's kind of older and she's doesn't need me around that much, right? But it's becoming a very dangerous thing to do, right? Especially at the end of my undercover career, I was doing a lot of things, a lot of investigations that were heavily involved with other types of crime, right? So like the illegal slaughterhouse work that I did, here in Florida, and the rooster fighting and things like that. So that was like, those were very, very dangerous situations that I was putting myself in. And I don't feel like I don't want to do that anymore, right? Given, my parents' situation at the moment. And the kind of impact that it's had on me, I don't think I've dealt with it yet. I haven't had the time, or I've always made excuses, right? Because I'm always so busy to not actually deal with a lot of the things that I saw. But I will say that I am very desensitized to that kind of violence, right? I don't, when I see it now, I don't, I don't cry anymore. Yeah. It's just kind of that's the way it is. And that's the way it's going to be. So let's get to work, right? Let's change our food systems. But, I do have, some sense of remorse, a little remorse, and a little regret, because it wasn't until I started doing employment-based undercover work, right, that I did for Mercy for Animals, that I didn't start to really it wasn't until then that I didn't really know what animal agriculture was, right? And everything that it touched, everything that it touches, right? And how animal agriculture, especially when you're talking about factory farms, how those facilities exploit everyone, like the workers, the animals, the communities surrounding it. It's just a big, exploitation everywhere. And unfortunately, even now, even today, when you are doing, factory farm investigations, those that end up being held accountable, right, for, animal cruelty, or, maybe, illegal practices, are not the ones that need to be held accountable, right? Because they're the ones that are just part of this broken system, that is, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, governments, funding these, industries.
Yeah. And, the big people at the top, the CEOs, they don't lose their jobs. They don't, they're not splattered all over the news. It's 9 times out of 10, it's undocumented immigrants who, can't find other work, or single parents, many kids, so, and they're making a living. They're not, what we're doing now, you and me, right? We're having kind of a very ethical conversation, right? About food, right? And about what we choose to eat. For a lot of people all over the world, they only think about food as sustenance, right? Yes. I think that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of times in the vegan movement, I think a lot of times we forget that. We forget that having the ability to campaign and to kind of demand that people change what they eat or think about, you know, why they eat what they eat.
Yeah.
That comes from a place of privilege in some way, right?
Absolutely, 100%, and that's kind of my beef with the in particular, but that's kind of my issue with a lot of the, you know, so-called vegan social media influencers. They always speak from a place of privilege, and they also have historical amnesia somehow. You know, like they're like, why love one and not the other? Well, you know, it's societal norms. Like we were all born in this society, and like it or not, this has always been the case for thousands of years. And so and a place of privilege is the truth, because I personally, you know, I've been there where I had to be fed on food stamps. Like I had to go to, you know, I was a struggling artist, okay? So I had no money to feed myself. I couldn't even afford to have a phone. And you can't be picky, you know, like you'll eat the bread, might have eggs, you know, you can't be picky at that point. And I would have never personally known or become vegan so young, because I became vegan at age 15. And it was really because of my friend. I was going through so much shit at that age. I was going through a lot of, you know, personal ordeals. My mind was not about, oh, let me find a solution, a problem to solve. Let me think about, you know, what can I help? Who can I help today? No, it was survival. And when you're in that mode of survival, like many people are, yeah, you can't say, oh, you shouldn't eat that, you know, don't you know better, you know? And like to teach them like their school children doing something wrong, I think that's really disrespectful, and it's not, you know, cognizant of, you know, people's struggles, day-to-day struggles. And, you know, we are privileged, you know, frankly, because I eat vegan. I can eat whatever I want. I have a full-time job. I can afford it. I don't have children. So I have a budget, you know, but not everyone does. And, you know, so eating vegan food when you're poor, that amounts to maybe eating rice, white rice, and, you know, like a few vegetables here and there. And, you know, that's about it. And it's not like very full nutrition, you know. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you that, you know, often, you know, you do all this undercover work and it leads to maybe some fines or, some, you know, maybe some slaughterhouses are shut down because of the cruelty. I don't know. We can talk about that actually, because you did work for Mercy for Animals between 2012 and 2015. And for viewers at home, in case they don't know, I'll just say a little bit about this organization. It's a US nonprofit whose mission is to construct a compassionate food system by reducing suffering and ending the exploitation of animals for food. From factory farm to corporate boardrooms, courts of justice to courts of public opinion, Mercy for Animals is there to speak up against cruelty and for compassion. So I think you were hired because somebody from Mercy for Animals saw the undercover work that you did in Korea, and they were so impressed that you guys did that with no training. You and Kevin, I'm speaking about. And so I think they hired you from that. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more how it came about and what kind of work you did for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm too modest. I don't know. I think, you know, I think I approached Mercy for Animals first, but maybe they did know of the work that we had done.
Well,
and
bottom line, they were impressed. They were
impressed
because they saw what you did in a foreign country with no training and no like sophisticated equipment. So yeah, that's very true. This equipment was not sophisticated at all, and there was no training there. So yeah, so you know, I Kevin and I, we both say, so you know, let's work together, you know, in the US, and you know, we both did work for Mercy for Animals, and you know, they offered to like train us properly, and you know, of course, provide all the cool gear that is used while undercover working in inside factory farms. And yeah, I mean, I did 3 investigations for them
one in the foie gras industry in New York, and another one in dairy in Wisconsin, and a third one in egg farm, but that was never released. But yeah, I mean, yeah, so that was, you know, between 2012 and 2014, or maybe 2015, and yeah, those were very intense periods of time, because, you know, employment-based undercover work is very strenuous.
The footage you're about to see was recorded with a hidden camera by a Mercy for Animals investigator at Hudson Valley Foie Gras, New York, an Amazon.com foie gras supplier. Foie gras, which is French for fatty liver, is produced by force-feeding ducks. At this Amazon foie gras supplier, workers violently grab ducks by their wings or necks, ram a metal pipe down their throats, and force food into their stomachs 3 times a day. This cruel force feeding leads to a diseased liver that is up to 10 times its normal size. As a duck's liver swells, it pushes against the animal's lungs, making it difficult for them to breathe. These ducks, who would normally spend the majority of their lives swimming in ponds and lakes, are kept in dark, windowless sheds and never given the opportunity to swim or bathe in water. They pant heavily as they struggle to breathe, a clear sign of distress caused by the force-feeding process. The workers who force-feed these birds confess that many of them die from the cruel and painful process.
And what I would do is I would do an investigation with them, and I would fly back to Korea, and I would keep doing work in Korea, and then so it was like back and forth,
Wow.
which also allowed me to kind of still be doing, like, do advocacy work, like kind of semi-publicly, and do undercover work like in the US. So I was very fortunate to be able to kind of in tangent, you know, continue to do all sorts of advocacy work.
Wow.
But yeah, those were pretty intense moments.
Like,
And
how long was like a typical employment? Because I think you show up there as an employee, like you know, you're hired through them somehow. They think you're one of them. And I think in Kevin's case, he said it was like 6 months, I think, that he spent on a hog farm. Was it something similar? Because you're talking about going back and forth, but I think you had to be pretty stable.
Yeah. So I would only go back and forth after I completed an investigation. So like
okay.
there was some times where, you know, I would spend, you know, 2 or 3 months kind of looking for work, trying to get hired at a farm, and it didn't work out. So I would fly back, you know, and then I would come back and try it again. You know, because the process of actually finding employment back then, you know, was pretty challenging. So I can only imagine what it is like now. It must be super, super hard, because they're just way more sophisticated, right? Especially here in the US. And they're just way more on alert, and they know what to look for, and they have, you know, a dossier of all undercover investigators, you know, so it's pretty difficult now to get hired at farms, I think. But yeah, I mean, work placement investigations can take anywhere from, you know, 4 weeks to 6 months, depending on what it is you're investigating, and, you know, if you're able to, you know, gather enough evidence to show, you know, like the habitual process, right, of you know, the everyday kind of ongoings of work there. So that depends, that varies per investigation. And you asked a question before, like, you know, what are some qualities of good investigators? You know, I think to be a good good investigator, forget being a good investigator. Just to do investigative work, especially work placement investigations, you need to be okay with being alone, right? And you need to be okay with being in the middle of nowhere and, living in a motel or finding a house or whatever, and just completely alone. And just doing the grind of, waking up at wee hours in the morning and, setting yourself up, going to work, 16-hour days, and then coming back and then looking through all the footage and doing your notes and then repeating that 6 days a week for weeks, sometimes months at a time. And you need to be you really need to be physically and mentally in a place where you are, again, you can be alone and you're able to just kind of just do it. And the loneliness, I think, it's what gets most people, believe it or not. It's not so much like the what they see or the actual undercover work or the work on the farm, even though it's very hard work. And it's not until you work in factory farms that you learn to appreciate, right, in a way, just wow, this is really hard work. And
physically,
the animals
as well.
Physically, mentally, and the pay is not great, right? And you're just watching, all these animals being exploited, all these workers being exploited. So yeah, I mean, it does take a special kind of person, I think, but it's not, I think if you wanted to do it, I think you could do it, right? It's doable. And there are many other ways to do investigations, not just, like work placement, right? You can always be like a third party and go in once and, to like an auction or something, right? And just sit in the stands and watch.
Life sentence.
No.
But those, personally, I don't think I could do it because I'm way too emotional. I'm a hypersensitive person, and not to say I'm sure that a lot of investigators are sensitive to begin with, but I guess they get hardened up, you have no choice. But it's just, it takes a special kind of mindset. You really have to see the end goal. And on that front, did any of the findings you came up with, for example, Mercy for Animals, did it lead to any decisive action, or was there a law enacted from this footage? Because I'm sure that would validate the work that the sacrifices you made, during that time. But
yeah, with Mercy for Animals, the only investigation that I think had some kind of meaningful impact was the dairy investigation that I did in Wisconsin. And, after that investigation, the dairy was a contractor for Nestle, right? So they lost that contract, and then Nestle, decided to adopt, kind of new animal welfare standards throughout their global supply chain, but how much of that did they actually do and enforce? And that's I think that's very hard to gauge, right? Unless you're visiting every single one of the contractors. But publicly, we're going to commit to new standards, blah blah blah. So I think that was a really good one. I will say the foie gras investigation was also really good, but foie gras wasn't banned because of it, right? I mean, it was a really good awareness campaign, and yeah, I mean, the dairy one was, I think, one of the most successful ones that I had with them. Me personally, there were other most successful ones that they've done, right? Other investigators have done for Mr. Animals, but in terms of me, I think the Wisconsin dairy one was the most successful one.
Yeah, the foie gras is something that I can't even watch. It just really disturbs me. Oh my God, I'm getting emotional because also they use similar techniques in Vietnam with dogs. They force feed them with tubes, and just to increase the weight of the dog at the sale point, and it touches their stomach. Anyways, it's just the worst thing. I can't imagine someone knowing that this is what it's done and eating it. You have to have a complete disconnect, I guess. Anyways, I do want to move on to animal recovery mission because you did some work for them as a director, actually, between 2018 2020. And Animal Recovery Mission is a vanguard investigative animal welfare organization developed in 2010 by Richard Kudo, shortly after being exposed to one of Miami's darkest and most brutal animal cruelty operations. ARM uses innovative investigative tactics to gather compelling evidence and collaborates with local law enforcement, state attorneys, environmental protection agencies, and the Animal Legal Defense Fund to produce concrete evidence to end criminal acts involving animal torture. So I know Animal Recovery Mission from, I think they're the ones who did that to expose Fair Oaks farms. Like, I don't know if you worked during that time, but that was very, I think it was very successful. Maybe we can talk about that, but I'm a little bit curious. Did you know Richard Kudo, personally? Like, how did you come to work as director of Arm Sanctuary and also at the head of their investigation unit?
Yeah, thank you so much for those questions. So I was introduced to ARM by a former colleague. At that time, between 2016 and 2018, I was actually mostly operating a plant-based burger and bakery restaurant in Seoul, South Korea.
Yeah, Hugs, right?
Huggers, yeah,
okay.
Huggers.
I love the name.
And I was doing that, and I was kind of also kind of parenting a lot, and still doing some advocacy stuff, like just in the background under the radar. But one of my colleagues, ex-colleagues, said, hey, Animal Recovery Mission is looking for a sanctuary director in the US. You might be a good fit. Why don't you reach out to them? And I did. I reached out, and it was a good fit. And this is in 2018, where I left Korea now, like for the first time in like 15 years. Came back to the US to help ARM run its sanctuary division, right? And for about like 6 months, I was doing that role, overseeing like 300 animals, 300 like rescued animals, and working with the vets and the staff and all that stuff, right? And then 6 months into that, I was asked if I want to take the role of director of investigations, and I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, that's kind of like what I've done, right? So so I took up that mantle, and I took up that mantle right when we were wrapping up the investigations for the Fair Oaks Farm case.
Oh, okay.
And I came in at the moment where it was time to just take all the footage, and then kind of get ready to like release the investigation.
Oh, wow.
So that's why you might have seen me like doing some press conferences in relations to that, to those particular investigations. I think it was 4, I think in total. And yeah, I mean, with doing undercover work with them was a new experience for me, because even though I had done some dog fighting investigations in South Korea and like wildlife trafficking investigations, like South Korea, in comparison to the US, is a very safe country. Like, it's very rare. It's very rare for people to have guns, and for like it's a very, I've never had the same feeling of being in danger, right? Like, as in the US, like you walk in and you walk into a illegal slaughterhouse, like illegal backyard slaughterhouse, or you walk into a rooster fighting operation or a dog fighting operation, and like almost everybody there has like a gun, right? And the people are doing drugs, and
criminals,
I mean, maybe, I don't know, So it's a very different feeling, right? When like, really, wow, okay, like if I am made, like my life is really on the line, right? So it was a very good learning experience for me. working with them, and kind of seeing that, like the illegal side of animal agriculture, and also animal fighting, because I
And
didn't really get to see that before.
is the most of the work based in Miami? Because I know they're based in Miami, and if I'm not mistaken, there's a lot of dog fighting rings in that region. Or
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the work that they do is kind of like Florida based in terms of like the investigative work, but they do a lot of undercover work throughout the country and also abroad. And in both factory farms, and also like any kind of like what do you call them? Like when they have like festivals where they like where they
like,
sacrifice animals and things like that,
oh
right?
wow, like
Yeah,
a
like in
pig
Nepal, or
roast, or okay, yeah.
yeah. So they help kind of expose and bring light to a lot of those things. But in Florida specifically, I mean, you have the rooster fighting, of course, you have dog fighting. There's a lot of illegal slaughterhouses, like a lot of backyard slaughterhouses, and there's like the horse meat trade, right? So the horse meat trade is a big one, the illegal horse meat trade. And that was kind of like one of the last investigations that I was working on, was that one. And yeah, like March 4th was like I was doing an investigation related to that in 2020.
Wow, okay,
Yeah.
very recent, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Exactly.
well, and was I right? Like Fair Oaks, like did they make
Mhm.
it with that campaign, or like what are the repercussions of that exposure?
So I think, for that campaign in particular, I mean, it was massively popular, and there was a lot of awareness, right, through
Yeah.
that campaign, and you know, to the point that even I think Billie Eilish like eventually commented or shared it or something like that. And there were also a lot of lawsuits that came out of that campaign, because
Okay.
a lot of consumers were upset that they were lied to, right?
Yeah.
That misrepresentation of how the animals were actually treated on the farms.
Yeah.
So I think that was a very good thing that came out of those things, because it also sets in motion like the ability for other people to kind of follow suit, right? And
Yeah.
hey, like there's so many ways to approach this industrial animal agriculture issue that's not just about like the cruelty to animals, even though that's very important, but like there's so many ways, right? You can look at it from the environmental side, from the basic business side, and like consumer side, right? Like, am I being lied to as a consumer? If I'm being lied to, then we can use that avenue to kind of help bring some pressure.
Exactly.
So
well, the footage was really troubling. I remember seeing it for the first time, and it was in a food court, and I screamed. Like everyone turned around. Like I was like shocking to see the way those cats were treated. It's just horrific. And if I'm not mistaken, all grocery stores threw out the milk like off their shelf, because it was so shocking to the public that people were really outraged. So that was a good one, I guess. It was a successful one. Doesn't mean that the dairy industry is crippled by it, by no means. But I mean, at least it made people think. And if I'm not mistaken, I think plant-based milk is gaining so much popularity for different reasons. I mean, some people are lactose intolerant, might be for health reasons, but it's certainly one of the fastest growing parts of the market, of the plant-based market. So good for that. And I know we're getting close to our time together, and there's so much I could talk to you forever, frankly. But in terms of dog meat industry versus the conventional farming of animals here in the West, because you've worked on both sides of the ocean, you've seen both types of industries. How are they different, or are they exactly the same? Like, if they are not the same, then in what ways are they different?
they're exactly the same. There's no, animal agriculture is animal agriculture. When you are when you run an animal agriculture operation and you choose to run it in an industrialized kind of fashion, right? Where it's nothing different than a car factory, right?
Yeah.
It's all the same. It's all the same. You might argue that, okay, well, there is a difference between factory farms and, smallholder, regenerative farmers, right? That have 10 cows and they milk by hand. And that to me is not that, small farm holders, that's not the problem, right? Even though there is some animal suffering there, right?
Yeah.
That's not what is doing the most exploitation. That's not what's killing the planet. That's not what's exploiting the workers, right?
Yeah.
And we need to be very cognizant of the fact that not everyone is going to be able to just live through a plant-based diet, right? Like there's still there are parts of the planet that are still going to have, smallholder farmers because of geographical regions or whatever it may be. But I mean, a dog meat farm, a pig farm, cow farm, it's all the same. There's no difference.
Yeah.
It's all the same. It's just a different animal.
Yeah.
But it's all the same. The process is the same. You raise them, you breed them, you raise them, and you slaughter them.
Yeah, it's the commodification of sentient beings, and that's all
exactly
be the same problem that we are trying
exactly.
to solve. But I always wonder, is it the same in terms of our progress that we can make? Because that's where I see a distinction, is that dog meat farms are more easily, well, maybe South Korea is special in the sense that it is a big industry over there. But in my mind, if we have, like I'm a certain age, I don't have that much time left. And in my mind, I feel the pet meat trade, because let's call it what it is. I mean, cats and dogs. We have a better chance of maybe eliminating that than having a vegan world, because like you said, a vegan world will take some time. I'm hoping it will happen, but to be realistic, I mean, that's a whole world, the whole world shares that problem of animal agriculture, because even in dog, cat meat trade nations, they have conventional farming, right, of animals. And so in my mind, that's why I'm so adamant about this dog, cat meat trade. I so want to eliminate that, because the minute it's outlawed, then we can really make progress for the other animals, because until like China will never become vegan unless this pet trade, meat trade is over and done with. And so are you more hopeful that we can ban the dog cat meat trade in our lifetime, you and I, or, are you hopeful about this end of the dog cat meat trade?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think we will see a ban on the dog meat trade in South Korea in our lifetime.
Okay.
I think so. Now, will it be completely phased out in our lifetime? Probably not. Will people still eat dog?
Of course, yeah.
Probably. But in terms of it being a legitimate industry, I think that we will see an end to that in our lifetime. In South Korea, I really do.
Well,
I really do. In the world, I don't know, but in South Korea, I really think we will see it in our lifetime.
Well, amen to that. I hope it's true. I mean, I do believe it will be phased out, like you said. I mean, you'll never completely eliminate it, because whenever you outlaw something, there's an underground black market for it. But and what keeps it alive is, I think there's that was always my point of puzzlement with the dog cat meat trade, is the element of torture. And I've asked my guests throughout many conversations, some say, oh, it's overblown, it's exaggerated, it's some parts of China are particularly brutal, but a typical dog slaughterhouse is very similar to any other slaughterhouse. I mean, the job has to be done. It has to be done quickly. And your experiences in South Korea, did you ever come to know that there is this underlying mentality that the more the dog suffers before death, the better the meat will be for the end consumer, like the more medicinal properties it will yield? Is that like something, or is it made up? Or do people
Yeah, I mean,
you know?
yeah, you know, that those things are, you know, were said, and you know, I mean, there's no scientific evidence to back any of that up, right?
No.
So but you know, just as you said, you know, is the type of cruelty kind of blown out of proportion? Like does every dog get boiled alive? Like,
No,
you know, does
no.
you know, does every dog get beaten for like 30 minutes before it's, you know, slaughtered?
No.
Like, no. I mean, we need to understand though, right? Like, you know, when you are commodifying animals, when you have an industrialized system, right? They're just products. So like, you gotta churn out the product as fast as possible, right? So
Yes, exactly.
it's gonna be, unfortunately, there's no good way to do that, right? Because
No.
the workers are tired, the animals are tired. Like, listen, it wasn't until I worked at the dairy that, you know, we had to move 5,000 cows from point A to point B 3 times a day. Like, if a
How
cow
many
doesn't want to
cows?
move, like 5,000, if a
Oh,
cow
wow.
doesn't want to move, the cow is not going to move,
No.
right?
No.
And it is your job, right, to move the cow.
Wow.
If you don't move the cow, you're going to get fired, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's just so much there. But at the end of the day, yes, it's inherently cruel because of the industrialized aspect of it, right? It's just so, you know, but like you said, you know, we visited some slaughterhouses that would slaughter, you know, hundreds of dogs a day. And that was just like
routine,
like a machine, like bop, 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 bop. There was no time to make the dog suffer or to like, you know, draw out the blood for like 20 minutes. No, it was like as many dogs as you could per hour. You had to process them, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there were some times that, you know, we visited some smaller, you know, slaughterhouses, and they would say like, yeah, you know, customer wants the dog to be done this way, so we do it that way for them. But is that the norm? No.
No. Okay.
It's not the norm. Is it still horrific? Yes. Right. I'm not taking away from that. It's still
horrific. Yeah.
Either way, it's horrific. So, you know, if you are comfortable with the other animals you're eating,
yeah,
then you should be comfortable with the way dogs are treated. So.
Of course, and that was kind of my reason, because I found out about the dog cat meat trade late, you know, very late in 2018. And it was the shocking images that got to me. I was like, why are they torturing? They just kill the dog, for crying out loud. Like, if you just want to eat the dog, there's a difference between torturing a dog and just killing him. And I couldn't figure that out. And I was hell bent on figuring this out. Like, what is happening? Why are they torturing? And a recent podcast guest, she's actually Chinese, local Chinese activist. And she told me that footage, those videos, those graphic images of dogs being boiled alive, being dismembered, you know, especially at the Yulin Dog Meat Festival, it was really out of the dog meat traders wanting foreigners to be outraged so that they would come and buy the dogs. Because they knew they could get, I think the price difference was astronomical. They knew if foreigners would come, they would get so much more money. So they were like taunting them, you know, like, you know, hey, you don't like this? We're doing this. Like, you know, if you want to stop it, well, you know, come and bring your money, American dollars. And I was like, oh, for the first time, it kind of made sense. You know, I was like, Okay, that kind of makes sense. And of course, she did say that, there are parts, Chinese are the most superstitious people. And there is some kind of mythical belief that, the more adrenaline runs through the dog's blood before death, that it'll be better meat, better tasting, better for you. It'll elevate your chi. So she did say that, some people do make a point of torturing the dogs, but it's not like the standard, like you said. So thank God for that, I guess, but it's all bad, at the end of the day. But, we're hopeful that, the pandemic sure led some changes in China. We had like 3 cities ban dog cat meat consumption. So that's huge. And we're hoping more and more will, it'll have a domino effect. Currently, you are the head of operations at 50 by 40, an organization that is championing comprehensive change in global food systems and aims to cut animal agriculture by 50% by year 2040. 50 by 40 collaborates with partners from a wide swath of sectors from vastly different backgrounds, yet wholly dedicated in their missions to improve the way food is produced and consumed. So I'm a little bit curious, when and how did you get involved with this organization, 50 by 40?
Yeah, I was job hunting and, I've been following 50 by 40 for quite some time and really interested in the work that they were doing. And I just really like the very clear mission, which is also the name of the organization, right? 50% reduction by 2040. Yes. And that to me was really a very good selling point. And I also, like the pragmatic and practical approach that 50 by 40 takes in, coming to terms with the fact that change happens via progress, right? And you can't go from A to Z, by skipping letters. And it's, the work that 50 by 40 does is really based on realism and what is actually happening on the ground. And it takes into account, so many things into when it comes to how can we transform our food systems so that it's, more just and equitable and less harmful to the environment, the people involved in that kind of work, and also the animals. So, I'm all about that because there is, suffering now and change needs to happen now. But we also need to acknowledge that change is different. Change looks different in different parts of the world, different people. And, a food system that works for folks in the global north might not be a food system that works for, folks in the global majority or the global south. So, that's kind of why I decided to try and join. And luckily, here I am.
Yeah, that's great. I had never heard about this organization until I researched you for the podcast. And I'm a little bit curious, like, how is it that they're going to achieve this very lofty goal of cutting animal agriculture? I don't know if it's worldwide or they're focusing on the United States. By year 2040, which is it's coming up soon enough. And so can you tell us a little bit more how they're getting, how they're enacting these changes? Is it, at the government level, or are they working? I'm not sure. Like, I'm a little bit
curious. Sure. Yeah, no. So it is 50% globally. We acknowledge the fact that, for example, the global north can maybe get to 50% by 2040, but a place like India, for example, we might see a slight increase, right? So, it's going to be the global average because, again, there are so many factors that play when it comes to food systems, right? There's like the geography, geopolitics, general politics. I mean, look at what's going on right now in Europe and the impact on food systems there. So, what we do is we engage in advocacy work, and we engage in both the private and public sectors. And we seek to align like the thinking and long-term goals behind the scenes. We like to be behind the scenes and coordinate between many organizations, and hence we have the 50 by 40 partner network, right? And we believe that this kind of coordination and collaboration will accelerate progress, right, towards the goal, and make sure that the work of one organization in a space does not negatively impact that of others. Because what's missing, I think, heavily in this food systems change movement is we need to be collaborative. And even though each organization has their own sector that they focus in, right? For example, one organization might be all about alternative protein. One organization might be focused on food sovereignty, right? Both organizations need to realize that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and it's all hands on deck. And we need everyone doing everything they can to tackle what is like systems change. So it's not just alternative protein, it's not just food sovereignty, right? It's not just whole foods, plant-based diets, it's not just health, it's not just finance, like it's an intricate web of systems. So we believe that by enabling this kind of convening and collaboration and coordination between groups, then groups can start to work more together and realize that, hey, like they need us as much as we need them. And we need to have this kind of united front so that we can all achieve the same goal at the end of the day, right? Which is change food systems for the better. So go ahead.
I'm, like, as far as I know, I'm not an expert by any means in this, although maybe I should be. We all need to research this area a little bit more if we want the change to happen. But as far as I know, it's, the animal agriculture industry, especially here in Canada, it's a big, exporting, industry, and it brings in a lot of money for the government. It's heavily subsidized. So unless you can tackle it from that end, I don't see how you could really bring about systemic change like that in such a short time. So I'm assuming someone's working with the government, to try to, get farmers away from animal, breeding and, production to something a little bit more sustainable for the planet. So any words on that?
Yeah, so 50 by 40, when 50 by 40 does its own kind of work, 50 by 40 is very special in that it's a partner network, right? We lead a partner network, but we also have our own organizational priorities that we work on, right? Whether it be the just livestock transition, whether it be being involved heavily in international fora, such as, COP26, COP27 coming next year, the UNFCCC, the UNEA, and pushing those conversations on that stage. But we do have several partner organizations in our partner network that work on that on the ground level policy change, right? Anywhere from like city policy, state policy, federal policy, right? So, we 50 by 40 doesn't necessarily do that kind of work, but we help our partners and kind of empower them to do that kind of work by being part of the network, sharing resources, and being a loudspeaker, right, for the work that they do.
And are you able to give us an idea of the kind of partners you're working with? Any names that you could, mention? Or?
Yeah, sure. We have, our partner list is about 70 members at the moment. We range from organizations that are working in climate change, global south, health and nutrition, meat reduction alternatives, sustainable food systems. And they range from, for example, Animal Legal Defense Fund to the Aquatic Life Institute, Brighter Green. We have Cellular Agriculture Australia. So many. We have Encompass, which is focused on DEIJ and making sure that we have a diverse and equitable movement in terms of how we operate. They range from Friends of the Earth, Good Food Institute, Greenpeace. We have from small to big, and just every single sector that is trying to tackle this systemic change.
I'm curious. I think I heard a podcast with I forgot, it's Brown, the name? He's got the same family name as, Impossible Foods, the founder, Arthur Brown, or I forgot. Do
And
you know?
what was the name? Sounds familiar. What was the podcast?
Okay. Well, the point I was trying to make is that I listened to a podcast with him, and he said that his goal with Impossible Foods was to completely replace animals in our food system by year 35. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's ambitious.
Ambitious.
Great. And is he a partner of yours? Like, I'm assuming like it would be a great partner to have, because he's invested so much money and research into creating food that really tastes like meat. It cooks like meat. It looks like meat. It smells like meat. And so his goal was like, if you give people a product that's as good or better than the meat-based product, and it's competitive price-wise, ideally even cheaper, then there's no need for them to keep buying animal products. They're going to go for the better alternative. And so that's his philosophy. I really pray that he will make it happen. It sounds like a lot, but, like, what's your opinion of him? I'll get his name down.
Yeah, no.
The podcast notes.
Yeah, I mean, anyone working to change food systems on that level is a friend of mine. If they're not, they should be.
Yeah.
And our partner network currently consists of nonprofit organizations, right? So we don't have, for example, like foundations or corporations. There is, hesitation there of some kind of conflict of interest, and
right.
But the goal for us at 50 by 40 is to convene, encourage collaboration, and then also through that promote the work that our partner network is doing. Because at the end of the day, 50 by 40 doesn't do a lot of the work that they're all doing on the ground every day. We have our own things that we work on. But we are here to amplify their work and make those connections. Like, for example, something else that we have is we have something called working groups, right? For example, we have the health working group, the communications working group, and the corporate engagement working group. And through those working groups, the partner network meets, right? For those who are interested or working in those different sectors, and they meet to collaborate, to work on, time-based projects together, to maybe, see if there are any funding opportunities somewhere. So it's about creating spaces for people with the same goal to convene, collaborate, and, find opportunities to expand the work that they're doing.
Well, I found his name. It's Pat Brown.
Pat Brown, yeah, okay.
And that's Impossible Foods, and Beyond Meat is Ethan Brown. So podcast with your good friend Kevin Leahy, and we were both saying it's kind of weird. They should be part of the same family, but anyways, it doesn't matter. And so I guess if viewers at home want to learn more, I mean, obviously I'll post the link to the website of 50 by 40. And I guess at this point, the best way to support the work that you're doing over there is to donate, I'm assuming. Is there anything else that viewers could do?
That is a good question. We currently are not ready to take public donations, but hopefully that will happen soon. So, a great way to support us is, by visiting our website, visiting our social media handles, 50by40.org or 50 by 40 for Twitter and LinkedIn. And Facebook, and just, check out the work that we're doing. And more importantly, go to our website and check our partner network page and see who our partners are, because the work that they are doing is the work that is driving the systemic change. So, when you have someone, from Impossible Foods or Beyond Meat creating a new product, how can we get that product into school lunches, for example, right? That is very localized policy work that is creating change on the ground and helping to change food systems from within, right? We can't change food systems if we still have, poorly dispersed school lunches, for example, or unhealthy hospital lunches, right? So it's all connected, and it's all about working together.
That's great. Well, personally, I have tried, I don't know if you've tried it, like Beyond Meat, burgers, and I find it a little bit off-putting. I think it does mimic meat quite a bit, and I don't remember. It's been so long since I've eaten meat, but I'm assuming it's like a foreign taste, and you're like, ooh, I'm not sure I like it. But have you tried those kind of, mock meats, and what's your taste on those? Like, do you like them?
Yeah, I've tried a lot. I've been very fortunate to be able to sample lots of them, and but for me, I think as I get older, the more I just kind of lean towards whole-based plant food stuff.
Yeah.
My daughter, she's 7, and she still doesn't like any of the raw meat stuff. Like she doesn't. She won't. She doesn't. I've tried. I've made her all the plant-based chicken nuggets. I've made her all of the.
She doesn't like
burger.
it.
No, she doesn't. But there was a time when I first became plant-based that I was like, this is great. It's so good. It's awesome. But I think now my palate might be changing, and also I'm really keen on trying cellular meat, right? So like lab-grown meat.
Yeah.
I think that is also going to play a huge role in shifting away our food systems from what I call live animal protein, right? Which is from an animal that was bred, raised, and slaughtered, right? We shouldn't have that, right? So if people can have real meat without needing to breed, raise, and slaughter an animal, and it's good for the environment and it's healthy, I think that is a win-win for a lot of people. So
I agree. I think, it holds a lot of promise as lab-grown meat. And, people say, well, it's so expensive. I think there's a restaurant in Singapore that's already serving a lab steak. You can have a whole steak and it's lab-grown. But if the meat was not subsidized, it would be pretty expensive too. Like you have to remember.
That's what I say.
It's a whole system problem. So we need to make those changes happen. So obviously, viewers at home, I encourage you to go visit, their social media, 50 by 40, the website, share it, get the word out, support the partners, because I'm sure their partners do take donations, so
Absolutely.
Working with nonprofits. Okay, I have just like a cute little question that I threw in there to end the podcast. And I think you've been vegan for quite a bit of time at this point. Like how long did you say?
12 years, I guess.
12 years, okay.
12 years, yeah.
And so what was your favorite pre-vegan food dish or, something that you really enjoyed? And have you found a decent substitute or alternative?
Wow, yeah, I used to love barbecue ribs.
Yeah.
that was barbecue ribs, or like a good cheesecake.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I was never really a heavy meat eater, but I didn't shy away either. But I could remember like one of the things I remember eating was like a really good rack of pork ribs, right?
Yeah.
And I have found really good replacements for that, although I don't eat that stuff very much nowadays. But the thing I do keep eating is vegan cheesecake. That I could eat forever.
I know that's an easy one, actually. It's like pretty good, alternatives out there for sure. Like I've, sometimes I myself, I've never been big on dairy products, but good cheesecake is good. Like sometimes you don't want like a chocolate cake. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have those alternatives, and they're out there. Like they're in grocery stores now. Like there's just no. I mean, they're a little bit more costly, but like what's a few bucks if you can have a good conscience?
They're actually really easy to make. They're really easy to make if you have a food processor. It could be nut based. I like to use cashews, like cashew based.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
it's maple syrup. Yeah, I'll share my recipe with you.
Oh,
Afterwards.
wow. Okay, that would be so cool. Your recipe, I'll post it in the podcast. Because actually, the last time I did a cheesecake from scratch was actually when I turned vegan at age 15. That was a while ago. And I remember it was tofu. I mean, there was not a lot of products, a lot of information, no internet. And so I had found this recipe to make, fake burgers. It was done with like tofu, oats. I would put onions in there, and it was pretty decent. Like, to be honest, it's just a lot of trouble to make it stick. And the cheesecake was also tofu based. We would make like a pineapple glaze. Me and my girlfriend became vegan at the same time. And so, yeah, there's so many ways you can have fun in the kitchen, and still be ethical and, not cause the planet and animals harm. So I encourage everyone, let's try his vegan cheesecake recipe. And my final question for you, AJ, is, the podcast, it was started back in the fall of 2019 to tackle the dog-cat meat trade issue, which I felt was really misunderstood. There were a lot of misconception, misinformation. And, my goal with the podcast was to educate myself and others, hopefully, so that we could become better advocates. I feel like you cannot fight a cause if you don't know about it, if you don't understand it. But the podcast has, now gradually broadened its reach. And, I've had Alf, activists on the show. I had Shannon Keith on the show at the beginning of the year. And she was all about, tackling both issues. She worked on the dog cat meat trade, and she's also the pioneer for animal rights and, working with, animals caught in lab experiments. So any guest recommendations for me?
Guest recommendations for you? Yeah. I mean, I have plenty that I could recommend from 50 by 40's partner network that I think are doing incredible work in tackling food systems, from people doing work, heavily localized work on the ground, to those kind of working on more big picture stuff. I'll be more than happy to send you a list of names.
That would be great. And, given your past and, you've lived in Korea for quite a bit of time, would you have anyone, because, the podcast, I've had quite a few guests from China, whether it was a nonprofit or activist, which I love to speak to activists, local activists. Would you have anyone to recommend from South Korea that has a good enough English that they could be on the show?
I'll think about that one.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Not sure.
Yeah. Not sure. Not sure. But maybe. For me, I had an interesting experience in Korea because I eventually, before I started my advocacy work there, I was already speaking Korean. So like all of my advocacy work in Korea was done in Korean. So like I wasn't ever in situations where I would meet someone that was a really good English speaker that was also advocating.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure that there's someone just in the back of my mind that I'm not thinking about, but I'd be more than happy to send you those names as well.
Okay, well, how about that was something that when I heard that you were like pretty much fluent in Korean, which is super impressive. Like you were born in South America. Is it Brazil or Venezuela?
Venezuela, yeah.
Venezuela. So you speak Spanish, you speak, English, French, or?
No. Just Spanish, English.
That's
and
one
Korean.
Language you haven't mastered yet. Could you say, like, send us off, with a nice phrase in Korean and tell us what it means? I'm putting you on the spot, I realize. But.
You are, and okay. Let's see. Okay. 이 팟캐스트를 많이 들어주셔서 많이 고맙겠습니다. So I said I would really be thankful and appreciative if you listen to this podcast.
Oh, I love it. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much, AJ.
Of course.
And, obviously we'll keep following you, and you keep surprising us with every organization you work at. You make change happen. And so really grateful for your dedication to seeing a better world for animals and all life being.
Thank you. The pleasure and honor is mine. Thank you for allowing me to be on your podcast.
All right. Well, take care, and I'll let you know when this will be released.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care, AJ. Bye.
Bye.